What's up guys, my name's Liam and today we're going to be taking a look at the Meow gaming gear mouse pads. As I was visiting Gen 3 Tech Studio, I was taking a look at these pads and I enjoyed them so much that I reached out to them, asked them to send me out all their models. So I'm going to break them all down and ultimately try and help you decide if any one of these could possibly be the perfect gaming mouse pad for you. So let's check it out. And before we get started today, I did want to let you know that these were sent out to me by MetKeys. How everything you're going to be hearing in this video is going to be my own words and my own opinions. All of these did arrive to my front door in this flat packaging box. Some of them did have a different box style. The Ultrabrake and the Ultracontrol did arrive in this envelope style packaging, but nice and easy to store if you need to do so. And then the other versions, the Ultraglides, they did arrive in this version where you open it up from the middle. You could pick a couple of these up in 3 different sizes, but the biggest options they had available for all of them comes in at 490 millimeters in width by 420 millimeters in height, and these are all sitting at 4 millimeters in thickness. They all feature an PU base. They have very similar properties to authentic Rogers Pour-On, but they feel just a little bit more firm and the bottom of it feels a little bit more sticky. So these all stuck to my desks nicely. I didn't have any issues with them moving around on me. The stitching on these was done very well. It's about as good as it gets, very thin. I got the stitching coming in at about 3.5 millimeters in thickness, whereas the base comes in at 4 millimeters. So it does sit about 0.5 millimeters below the surface. They do have their logo down here in the bottom right hand corner, and it is slightly raised up off the surface. So if you're to get your mouse down there, you can feel it on at the bottom of your skates. So like I had mentioned, the build on all of these is similar. It feels really great and premium all around. So let's go ahead and jump through the surfaces. I'm going to kind of go through and walk you from the slowest to the fastest of my experience and let you know the differences that I found in using all of them. All right, so first off, we're going to be starting out with the Ultrabrake. As you can see, the writing is a little bit different on here than the bigger logo on the other versions. Again, this is still raised up. You can slightly feel it on the surface. The surface of the Ultrabrake does have a bit more of a texture to it. I'll go ahead and show you a close-up shot of what it actually looks like. But out of all the versions, I did kind of find that this one seemed to be the slowest and the most controlled. You do get a pretty high sense of the static friction, and you do notice a little bit of tugging going back and forth, but I don't feel like it's super overwhelming. The performance of this actually feels really good. It just feels like a really solid control pad. As you can see, it has a pretty high dynamic glide as you're going across there. The base does not feel too plush to me. It does have that firmer feeling, so you don't get too much of a sinking feeling on here, but you do get a nice ability of control and stopping power the harder you push in. So again, just out of all of these, I'll go and I'll throw up a comparison of some of the other ones as we move through here, but this is definitely the one with the highest static and dynamic friction all around. Again, this doesn't feel too muddy or anything like that. The performance is really smooth on this, but with a great sense of control. So next up we have an Ultracontrol, and this is kind of a standard type of a cloth filling surface, and it does feel actually really smooth to the touch. So where the Ultrabrake has a bit more of a texture there on the surface, you don't feel a whole lot of a texture here. You get a great sense of control when you're pushing into it, but it doesn't really feel like it has a whole lot of the dynamic or the static friction there when you're making micro adjustments or as you're gliding across the surface. So as you can see there, the glide looks very smooth. The overall feeling and performance of the Ultracontrol feels right in line, almost nearly identical to the Zowie GSR. Now taking a quick look up at these close next to one another, you can see there's a slight variance in the weave. So I'm not sure whether it's just that or it is some type of a looser weave, but the Ultracontrol all around does feel a bit slower and more controlled than the GSR2. And then just kind of moving up the ladder there, the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro, this is much more controlled through my experience with using it than the Saturn Pro, and even putting it up against the Artisan FX0. So the fact that this pad gives you an excellent sense of control without feeling too muddy or anything like that, it's been working great across all types of games I've been playing, and I've been really liking this one a lot. All right, so next up we have the Ultraerialace, is I believe how you pronounce it. This one actually does come in 3 different colors. It comes in this white colorway, also comes in a red and a purple as well. And the surface on this one, it does have a bit more texture, so it is kind of somewhat similar feeling to the Ultrabrake. This honestly reminds me a lot of kind of a different but similar style to the Aqua Control Plus. Now I do actually have a really old beat up white Aqua Control Plus, and I was kind of going back and forth and testing them out to one another. The surface on that feels just a little bit more abrasive. This one feels a little bit more soft and smooth. On the Aqua Control Plus, you do feel a bit more of the static friction, where this one does seem to have less of static friction. But the overall speed of this is a step up from the Black Ultracontrol that I was just showing you guys. It does have a little bit less of static friction. Even on the dynamic friction, it does feel quite a bit quicker. And the one thing about this abrasive texture on here, you do still get a little bit of a tug. And the one thing about the surface is, even though this is kind of a quicker style of a pad, it really does give you a really great sense of stopping power still as you were to pressing it with your skates. So I really do like the performance of this. It kind of is similar to the speed of something like the Zowie GSR2. I did find it to be just a little bit slower than the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro. This pad does give you a pretty good balanced speed while still being able to maintain control down to the micro adjustments or even as you're gliding across the surface. So next up we have the Ultracontrol V2. Now this one only does come in orange. Again, it does come in 3 different sizes, but I did opt for the 490 by 420 version of this. And as I mentioned before, I really like the Ultracontrol a lot. So this feels very similar to it. The one difference between this and the original version is the original version is a bit more controlled. So same properties, it kind of has that smoother feeling surface. When taking a close-up look of the Ultracontrol V2 next to the Artisan FX0, as you can see, the weave on both of these look nearly identical. Now as we zoom in further, you can see that the weave on top of the Ultracontrol V2, it does look like it is a bit looser than the FX0, where the FX0 looks like it's kind of a little bit tighter or closer together there. And with this variance, even though these pads do feel incredibly similar to one another, these looser properties kind of do attribute to the Ultracontrol V2 being a bit slower than the Artisan FX0 in the overall properties. But the performance between both of these, as I was A and B testing them to one another, they do feel very familiar to each other. But just that smooth feeling across the surface, I do feel like you have a really low sense of the static friction there, so it's really effortless to make micro adjustments, yet it doesn't feel too slippery or anything like that. You really get a really good sense of control. The glide on it feels really good, very smooth, a little bit on the quicker side, but not too fast. So I really do like the performance of this. The performance between this and the Ultraerialace, they actually feel very similar to one another when it comes to the speed, but the surface of this is smoother. This one has a little bit less of both the static and the dynamic friction, but the glide on them is really similar to one another. On that white copy that I am getting just a little bit more control, a little bit more tugging, and a little greater sense of stopping power if you push harder into it. But the performance of this really is great, and it really does line up with some of my favorite mouse pads that are on the market. All right, and then finally we do have the ULTRADASH. This does come in 2 different colors. It comes in this blue colorway and this red. I actually really like this blue colorway a lot, but I have been having a lot of issues with keeping it clean. And I don't usually put anything on my mouse pads or keep a lot of things on my desk. I just usually have a drink as I'm gaming or testing out with it. So just one thing to note about this blue copy. But all around, when it comes to the surface of this, this is still a cloth style feeling surface, but it has very smooth touch to it. It has a slight bit of texture when you move across the x-axis and the y-axis. It is very minimal, and the performance of this actually feels pretty unique and different from anything else that I've used out there. So when it does come to the speed, this is the quickest version out of all these Meow Gaming Gear mouse pads that I have tested. It does not really feel necessarily so much like a speed pad. It still kind of is in the faster realm of control through my experience and testing while using this. I did find that this came out a little bit quicker than the Zowie GSR2. It's kind of right in line with the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro, and it is still slower than the Artisan FX0, but the overall surface on this, going back and forth comparing this to Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro, since they're pretty similar to one another, I do feel like the surface on this does feel more firm, and the properties are actually a little bit different from one another, even though the overall speed is pretty similar. This one does offer a greater sense of static friction, so I do notice more tugging when going back and forth, and I was comparing it to the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro, but the glide across the surface once you do get moving, it is actually really quick and a very smooth glide overall. All right guys, so that wraps things up on the Meow Gaming Gear mouse pads. As I said, I really do enjoy all these a lot. I think all of them are great, all of them feel great, they have really solid quality to them. If I had to pick what my favorite ones were, my personal preference, I do like the Ultracontrol, I like the V1 and the V2. Between both of them, it's kind of a toss-up. You know, if you like a little bit of faster glide, then obviously go with the V2. If you do prefer a bit more of a controlled and slower experience, and go with the V1. Again, the properties between them are not that different from from one another. They both feel very similar, but I really do feel like Meow Gaming has done an incredible job with just the overall build and the feeling of all these. They absolutely sit right up in line with some of the top mouse pads out there that I prefer using on a day-to-day basis. All right, guys, so if you have any questions or feel like I left anything out, please let me know down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed watching this video and are interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. And thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.